In 2024, scientists did something that should have been impossible. They reconstructed the voice of a species that has been extinct for 40,000 years. And when they played it back, nobody expected what they heard. Because Neanderthals didn't grunt. They didn't growl. And they almost certainly could sing. What you're about to hear is going to change how you think about the closest relative humans ever had. Before we talk about sound, we need to talk about who Neanderthals actually were, because most of what you think you know is wrong. Neanderthals weren't primitive ape men stumbling through caves. They were a separate human species, Homo neanderthalensis. They had brains the same size as ours, in some cases slightly larger. They made tools. They made art. They buried their dead with flowers. They cared for their injured. They survived ice ages that would kill most modern humans within days. They lived across Europe and Asia for roughly 400,000 years. For comparison, modern humans have only existed for 300,000 years. Neanderthals outlasted us so far. And then, around 40,000 years ago, they disappeared. We'll come back to that. But first, let's talk about sound. The key to understanding Neanderthal speech starts with a tiny bone. A bone most people have never heard of, the hyoid. The hyoid bone sits in your throat between your chin and your larynx. It's the only bone in your body that doesn't connect to any other bone. It floats. And it is the anchor point for the muscles that control your tongue, your larynx, and your ability to produce complex speech sounds. For decades, scientists assumed Neanderthals couldn't speak like us because nobody had found a Neanderthal hyoid. Then, in 1989, archaeologists excavating Kebara Cave in Israel found one, a 60,000-year-old Neanderthal hyoid bone, perfectly preserved. And when they compared it to a modern human hyoid, it was virtually identical. Same shape, same size, same structure. But here's the thing about bones. A bone tells you the hardware exists. It doesn't tell you how the software worked. Just because a Neanderthal had the right bone didn't prove they could speak. So scientists needed to go deeper. In 2021, a team of researchers at the University of Alcalá in Spain did something remarkable. They scanned the ear canals of Neanderthal skulls using micro-CT technology, and they modeled exactly which sound frequencies a Neanderthal ear was designed to hear. Here is why this matters. Hearing and speaking are linked by evolution. Animals hear the frequencies they need to communicate with. Bats hear ultrasound because bats echolocate. Elephants hear infrasound because elephants communicate across miles. If you know what a species could hear, you know something about what they could say. What the researchers found was that Neanderthals had optimized hearing in a specific frequency range, the same frequency range as modern human speech, specifically the consonant sounds, the S sounds, the F sounds, the high-frequency sounds that carry meaning, the sounds that make speech speech. Their conclusion was direct. Neanderthals almost certainly had a communication system sophisticated enough to require hearing those frequencies. In other words, they were listening for something. And what you listen for, you can probably say. In 2024, researchers took this even further. Using detailed skull measurements, fossil evidence of the Neanderthal vocal tract, and computational modeling, they reconstructed what a Neanderthal voice box would have looked like. And then they simulated what sounds it could produce. The result was surprising. The Neanderthal vocal tract was shorter than ours, and positioned slightly differently. This means their voice would have been higher pitched than a modern human male voice. Thinner, more nasal in quality, but fully capable of producing a wide range of sounds, including vowels, including consonants, including the building blocks of language. One researcher described the reconstructed voice as sounding something like a high-pitched version of a modern human, speaking with a very slight nasal quality. Not a grunt, not a growl, a voice. Now, here is the question everyone actually wants answered. Could Neanderthals speak? Not just make sounds. Actually speak. With words. With meaning. With language. The honest answer is, we don't know for certain. Language doesn't fossilize. Words don't leave bones. But here is what the evidence strongly suggests. First, the FOXP2 gene. FOXP2 is called the language gene. It's a gene that, when damaged in modern humans, causes severe difficulties with speech and language. It controls the fine motor movements of the mouth and throat needed to produce complex speech. In 2007, researchers sequenced Neanderthal DNA and found their FOXP2 gene was identical to ours, exactly the same. Second, the nerve canals. The hypoglossal canal is a passage in the skull that carries the nerve-controlling tongue movements. In modern humans, this canal is large because we need precise tongue control for speech. In chimpanzees, it is small. In Neanderthals, it was the same size as modern humans, or larger. Third, the behavior. Here is where it gets really interesting. Neanderthals did things that almost certainly required communication. Coordinated hunting of large prey, mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, cave bears. These animals weigh thousands of pounds. You cannot hunt them alone. You cannot even hunt them in a small group without a plan, without coordination, without some form of language. Neanderthals also traded materials across hundreds of kilometers. Flint tools made from stone only found in one region have been discovered in sites far away. Someone organized that trade. Someone communicated across groups. Someone had words for, "Give me, that I will give you this, let's meet here." And perhaps, most remarkably, Neanderthals cared for their injured for extended periods of time. Skeletons have been found showing individuals who survived severe injuries, broken bones, lost limbs. Conditions that would have required months of care. Someone had to explain to the group why they were spending resources on someone who couldn't contribute. Someone had to make the case. Someone had to use words. Now, here is the part that surprises everyone. Could Neanderthals sing? The answer is probably yes. And this might actually tell us something more important than speech. Music predates language in human evolution. Before we had words, we had rhythm. Before we had grammar, we had melody. Researchers believe music was one of the first ways humans and human relatives bonded as groups, synchronized emotion, built trust. We have direct evidence that Neanderthals made music. In 1995, a bone flute was discovered at a Neanderthal site in Slovenia, the Divja Babe flute. A cave bear femur with 4 holes carefully spaced in a pattern consistent with a musical scale, dating to between 50,000 and 60,000 years ago. Made by Neanderthals, 40,000 years before the oldest modern human flute. Now, some researchers debate whether the holes were made by bears or by Neanderthals, but the spacing of the holes matches a pentatonic scale, the same 5-note scale used in music across virtually every human culture on Earth. From ancient China to West Africa to Native America, the pentatonic scale appears to be hardwired into human hearing, and Neanderthals may have discovered it first. So let's put this all together. What did a Neanderthal actually sound like in real life? Imagine a group of Neanderthals around a fire 50,000 years ago. Their voices would have been higher than a modern man's, more nasal, but not unrecognizable. You would have heard vowel sounds, consonant sounds, rhythm and variation in their speech. The same qualities that make human speech human. You would have heard laughter. Neanderthals almost certainly laughed. The same neural structures that produce laughter in humans exist in all great apes. Laughter is ancient. It predates language by millions of years. You would have heard something like music. Rhythm, possibly humming or tonal vocalization. The kinds of sounds humans make when they are together, safe and connected. And you would have heard words, or something like words. Not English, not any language you'd recognize, but structured sound carrying meaning from one mind to another. Now we come back to the question I set aside earlier. If Neanderthals were this sophisticated, why did they disappear? The old answer was simple. We were smarter. We had language. They didn't. We outcompeted them. But the evidence we've just walked through makes that answer hard to defend. The real answer is more complicated and more human. Neanderthals didn't disappear because they were inferior. The evidence suggests they disappeared because of a combination of factors: climate change that disrupted their food sources, disease brought by modern humans moving into Europe, competition for resources, and interbreeding. That last one is critical, because Neanderthals didn't fully disappear. They merged. If you are of European or Asian descent, between 1 and 4% of your DNA is Neanderthal. They are still here, in you. So here is what the science is now telling us. Neanderthals had voices, probably higher pitched than ours, slightly more nasal, but capable of producing the sounds of speech. They had the anatomy for language, the gene for language, the behavior that required language. And they may have made music 40,000 years before we built our first cities. The grunt you imagined the primitive ape man stumbling through the dark that was never real. That was a story we told ourselves to feel better about being the last human species standing. The real Neanderthal sat around fires just like this one, told stories, made plans, laughed at each other, sang, grieved, loved, and spoke. The question we started with was, what did Neanderthals actually sound like? The answer is closer to you than you thought. Higher in pitch, more nasal, but recognizable, human. And somewhere in the 1 to 4% of your DNA that came from them, there might be an echo of that voice, a memory your genes carry of the last time two human species sat together and spoke.